Okay, everybody. I'm gonna just talk a little bit about putting Ruby onto the command line, and you may think, well, that's a silly talk to give because Ruby's already on the command line. You can just call Ruby. But I guess what I want to talk about is really making a very nice shell script, something that looks like it belongs on the command line, something that really behaves like other command line utilities like cat, right? So step 0 would be to write something. And here I'm writing a little script that's going to open up a file. It's going to read each byte, and it's going to reprint it with, as if it were binary. And that's what Printf does. So if I were to run this, you can see that it's now printed out in ones and zeros. The $sign's on there because a new line's not printed because we're just printing ones and zeros. So once you have a little algorithm like that, then the next thing you might want to do is very simple things like add options to it, build it out. So here I'm using option parser to add options to it, add usage, so you can do help and everything, and make it loop over argv so that you can provide all the file names through arguments to the command line. And you'll notice it's still got the exact same algorithm down there. So now what that lets you do is, as I've written it, pass the -b flag to indicate that you want binary, and now it's going to be reading the ABC text file, the XYZ text file, and printing out the binary. And since I have the option to make this a little bit more clear, I'm not going to add the B flag for the rest of this, and I'll just call it and print out echo out the contents. So this is really behaving just like cat. So ABC, XYZ. That's what's in those text files. So the next step is to make it a little bit, make it look like it really belongs on the command line, which means taking the .rb off of the file, making the file executable, and at the top of the file adding a shebang line, which will look up your Ruby and execute Ruby for you. That way you don't have to type Ruby in front of this when you run it. So that's what I've done. I've schmotted this, made it executable, and now I can do printf2, and I'm doing the same thing as before, where I'm printing out ABC, XYZ. So the next step is to start handling errors gracefully. Because if I were to do printf2 and put in a missing file, then I get a big stack trace, and I'm now revealing all of my contents. And so instead of that, I'm going to add a begin at the top. At the end, I'm going to add rescue, and now I'm going to just print out the error message and exit 1 unless I'm debugging. And for that, thank you very much. Okay, so now that's a much nicer message that's coming out. And if you ever wanted to add back the debugging, you can do ruby opt-d, and now you get all of the stack trace information, all the debugging information. So if you needed to do development on this, you could. But otherwise, it's going to nicely behave and show just the error message. There are some other types of errors there's some other types of things that really are handy. For instance, it's a Unix convention to handle standard in using a dash. So now you can handle standard in as a file, and you can specify where you're going to read from standard in and where you're going to read from other files. And so here I'm going to be catting ABC, using the dash right there to indicate read from standard in, and then doing XYZ. And so you can see that ABC and XYZ are being printed out. And to do that, you just identify, well, when am I using a dash, and I'll use a 0 there, and otherwise I'll open up the file. Next step is to handle standard in by default, and so basically I'm just going to add a dash if my argv is empty. After that, you may want to handle interrupts correctly. So if you have a long-running input like yes, where I'm just printing out a whole bunch of things, if I want to add Control-C, rescuing the interrupt and returning 130 is kind of a standard thing to do. You'll find that cat behaves exactly that way. You may also want to handle a closed pipe gracefully. So if you were to be piping this into Ruby and close standard in, you would get an epipe error, and that will look really nasty if you don't handle it. And so here you can rescue that and exit 0. That's also a nice standard thing to do. The next thing is add it to your path. That way you don't have to do the // so just export the path there. And the last thing is to add man pages. This is the way you can do it there. And then you can do man, well, I haven't added this to the path, so you won't see it, but if you add it to the path as I did in the previous step, then the man page would come up and show up. Let me just show you that, because that's really pretty cool. So I'm going to export this. And I'll go up to the higher directory. So if I had which sprintf, then, whoops. Oh, now I need to do it in this directory. If I do which sprintf, now it's there. And you can see it's on the command line for just that. And if I were to do man sprintf, then you can see a whole man page come up. And the directions to do that, I have all in this directory. The links for it are RMR12 sprintf. That will take you to a gist where all of this code lives. If you get into testing shell scripts, you might want to look at this TS project that I've got going. And I'm Simon Chiang. So
thanks,
there you go.